what I'm going to do is, as Ollie said, in 45 minutes, take us all through what I would put as a generic presentation, though it's anchored in my works that I've done. And I'm trying to tell a story as to how I've actually transformed from a corporate career, the typical 9 to 5 or a 9 to 9 job, into a visual ethnographic researcher, and having turned into from an author into a filmmaker is the story that I want to actually talk about, and essentially leave at the end of it some key takeaways that I've personally experienced that have helped me in navigating through this entire mist of life, in transforming myself into actually doing what I really believe in. So that's the whole structure of this presentation. I want to start off with this particular picture, which I had clicked in Myanmar at the Inle Lake many years back. And what it makes me feel as though is that this is what my life has been like. I mean, in the short term, everything is visible, but in the distant, it's nothing is really visible. And we are trying to navigate through this mist to achieve our life's objectives. The reality is, philosophically, we don't even know if the next breath is going to come to us, right? And we are trying to make plans to achieve our objectives, our life's goals, and typically more so in the corporate life, where it's all goals driven, target driven, which is what I've lived for 25 years. We make those goals, we deliver them, but we don't know if our next breath is going to come. So how does one make this life meaningful, to say that, what, when you're on your last days in this world, all right, you lived this life and you saw it from the spectrum where everyone is running on that 9 to 9 kind of a treadmill, versus you did something that was close to your heart. How do you navigate through that? The navigation through the mist of life is what this picture represents to me. I thank myself that the opportunity has been given to me. I mean, I never asked for it. I definitely desired, but nevertheless, you really can't ask for it because it's not in your hand, is to see the life from two ends of the spectrum. It's like a seesaw. On one side and the other side how do you navigate and get onto the other side? So most of my life was earlier spent on the left side of this chart, which is corporate. And I call this as a structured life. A structured life, like I'm representing, it's a cube, and pretty much a structure that we follow day in, day out. We go to work, we follow commands, we have a hierarchy, we can't break the hierarchy. Yes, we are allowed creativity in that hierarchy, but there's only that much of flexibility you really have in that life. And you've lived through that for ages. And then in 2014, when I left American Express after 25 years of career, the one thing that I realized, and all of us go through this, is that change is very hard to manage. Changes, and especially if it's a change where your treadmill stops, your mind cannot actually navigate through that easily. Especially if it's a structured treadmill that you've been on, it's very hard to manage change. And especially if the change then is taking you on a direction where you're not going to replace your job with another corporate job, something that you've been used to for 25 years, and you choose that you will now explore something which is only a wishful thinking and you have no idea how you're going to achieve it. Basically what he's saying is, I'm going to get into a creative space and it's going to be an unstructured life. But at the end of the day, no creativity can stand on its 2 feet and get accepted in this world, which is a structured world, without you taking those creative moments, creative stories, creative aspects, and again giving it a structure. So this in many ways is a more challenging ask, where you have to create something and bring it down to the simple storytelling in a creative manner, in a structured manner back to the world. And this requires all the skill sets that a corporate job would require. I mean, you would require financial skills, you would require storytelling skills, which is the creative aspects of organizational management skills, influencing especially in the space that I'm operating, which you come to know now. It's very, very tough to operate in the space because I'm going into areas where others have not been going in, and then trying to give it a structure. So this is where I think the challenge is essentially in the creative space, that you just can't create something and leave it there. You have to give it a structure. But before I get down to my story, I just want to actually take a minute here. What have I done? So since 2014, when I left the American Express, my first contribution to the world in the creative space was on the left-hand side, the two books, which can be seen at the lostheritagebook.com. And if anyone wants, you can buy them from there. They're also available on Amazon in India, US, and other places. But basically, these are two large documentations on the remnants of the Sikh legacy in Pakistan. And if I was to take a minute or so just to describe why was this work important, that'll come out in the next slide. So before I go there, just allow me to also share with you what is on the right-hand side. We've recently launched on the YouTube two documentaries called Peering Soul and Peering Warrior, which are also anchored in the same subject, the Sikh legacy remnants in Pakistan. Essentially, the Peering Soul is trying to peer through the maze that our forefathers have left, and we don't have any memories of that. But essentially, for this generation, you're trying to peer through the maze to look at the spiritual sides, the remnants of the spiritual sides in the lands that became Pakistan in 1947. And on the right-hand side is the documentary called Peering Warrior, where our communities' martial history had churned, the forts where our forefathers created their history up till the Afghanistan border is covered in the second documentary called Peering Warrior. Now, these contents, both these documentaries are on YouTube. You can go on the YouTube, search for Peering Soul, Peering Warrior, write my name, and you'll get them and you can see them. Now, what was the need of doing these documentaries and these two books, and which have literally consumed about 4.5 years of my life? Each book is about 3 kgs. Totally, it's about 6 kgs of content, 1,000 pages. I often think that these are multiple PhDs inside 2 books. But what was the need? The need was basically, I can say it in the chart, in this map on the left-hand side of this page, where basically what I'm showing is the 2 countries. If you look on the left side of the Indian subcontinent, basically before British came into India, it was many vassals, many small kingdoms which were changing its geographies, its controls. What British came and did in India from late 1700s, when they stepped into Calcutta, they started actually acquiring territories under the East India Company. And finally, when they acquired the Punjab, which is on the western side, which is the yellow section, at that point of time, it was being ruled by the Punjabis, whom the British called as a Sikh kingdom, because they branded it as the person who was leading it by his faith. But to me, it was not really a Sikh kingdom. It was a very it was a kingdom where men of all faith, basically Punjabis, were ruling, and it was created by a minority community. Yes, if you actually segment it by faith, then yes, the Sikhs were on the helm of it, and it was Ranjit Singh's kingdom, which Ranjit Singh died in 1839. But after the Second Anglo-Sikh War, the last kingdom that the British took in the making of British India, the boundaries of which is given there in the black dark outline, this Sikh kingdom was the last kingdom that they took over in 1849. Now, 1947, 98 years later, when they are moving out of the country in the partition, in the 1947, what they do is they decide to divide this entire subcontinent into 3 geographies based on faith. So what got formed was the East Pakistan at that point of time, what we today know as Bangladesh. Actually, it was East Pakistan, and the West Pakistan was basically on the west side that you see the green section. And what one takeaway that I would say from this slide is that 98 years later, when they were leaving, the area that they make on the west side of this map as the West Pakistan, what we know today as Pakistan alone, because Bangladesh got separated out later on. 70% of what was the Sikh kingdom, the geography, 70% of that basically fell in the areas that became Pakistan. And Pakistan was created based on faith, based on religion, which basically was a Muslim majority country. And essentially for my community, what it meant is that a kingdom which was existing there for till 1849, in 1947 got divided, with 70% going into Pakistan and 30% of it in India. Now, in this process, 10 million people moved into the geographies based on faith. Hindus and Sikhs, basically from the areas that became Pakistan, moved eastwards into India, and Muslims who had the choice of going on the other side, who chose to go, they moved westwards into Pakistan. Out of this 10 million people, 1 million people died. Now, I must qualify here, all communities suffered. Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs suffered on this baseless, religion-based division of the Indian subcontinent. But my focus today is on the Sikh legacy in Pakistan. So I'm now going to navigate down to my community itself, which has driven me to do these works over the last 5+ years. If you look at the right-hand side, what I'm saying is, in the land of the 5 rivers, which is basically known as Punjab, Ab is a Persian word and Panj is 5, the land of 5 rivers. The 5 rivers, Satluj, Beas, Ravi, Chenab, Jhelum, flow into the Indus River. And basically, my community that moved out of this land, which became Pakistan, and came into India or moved elsewhere in the world, out of this one turmoil that was caused in 1947, one single exodus, resulted in the following impacts for the community over 7+ decades, what we are seeing in the society today. Basically, the impact is at the level of philosophy. The philosophies got diluted. The understanding is gone because the people from these lands, what they churn, that land going away, the philosophy gets impacted. Culture gets impacted because suddenly you don't have the lands where the cultures, centuries of cultures had been intermingling and had formed a beautiful intermingling culture, which now, as you move into new lands, you have to adapt. So culture got impacted. Language got impacted. Certainly our language of these lands, our present generation is not able to speak. The heritage which was left back, hundreds of years and thousands of years of heritage of all communities which were left on both the sides. The Sikh faith started with Guru Nanak in 1469, but in 550 years, whatever the community had built was overnight left away in 70% of the lands. So there's a physical impact of heritage, but heritage can be divided into 2 types, tangible and the intangibles. Tangible heritage, what was left back, is what I'm focusing as the primary, but I'm also doing the intangible focus study because a lot of the community was yet left back, though in minority, but they chose not to move. Now, in a new setup, how is that minority community that chooses to stay back culturally, in the terms of intangible aspects, getting impacted over a period of time, is what also I'm trying to study in this, right? So that's what my studies are in these 2 books and the 2 documentaries. But documentaries are a mere glimpse, but really the story comes out in the 2 books. But what was my motivation? So, and I'll come to how this evolved, but at that point in 2014, when I left the corporate world, my one driver to going into Pakistan was actually a very personal driver. And the personal driver was, my father was from the lands that is today under conflict, which is Kashmir. And Kashmir is divided between India and Pakistan. And right now the narrative is one side of the narrative that we hear. But the fact is, Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs, until 1947, were all across these lands. My father was from this place which is known as Muzaffarabad, is today in Pakistan administered Kashmir. And this is the Jhelum River, which is taking a U-turn. And I wanted to personally go to this place. But why? Because it's a place where in 1947, in October, on October 21st, when there's a tribal attack after the partition of the Indian subcontinent in August of 1947, Kashmir falls into a political challenge where the king of Kashmir was making a choice of going on which side, either Pakistan or in India or be an independent kingdom. As he was deciding, the tribals attack the place, the westernmost frontier of Kashmir, which is known as Muzaffarabad, which was my father's place. And on this bridge on the right-hand side, we had heard a lot of stories as we were growing up because a lot of our family members were massacred on this bridge. About 300 people were lined up and basically shot by the tribals who attacked. And those stories are ingrained in our family's traditions. So I actually, having left American Express, was not even planning to do this work because this work just evolved. I was honestly going to just change my job to another job. And I just asked myself, can I go to Pakistan? Now, I was born in India. I'm a Singaporean, but unfortunately in both the countries, the trust lacks. It's where you're born from decides whether you can come inside the country as the first parameter. A lot has changed, but I'm talking about 2014. That was the criteria. Now, I applied for the visa. For some strange reason, I got the visa. I got a 30-day visa, a free access visa, and I went to the country. I just had this desire to go to this point. And I did reach there on the 15th day, but this was a personal reason. But what was the bigger reason? The bigger reason was that for years I've been delving into the history of these lands. Now, all that I'm doing as an explorer's mindset, I'll give you the skill sets later on, but I'm telling you the story as to what's driving me. These are not overnight transitions that you can make. These transitions happen slowly. In some ways, there's an energy that's watching you and seeing how much of an effort you're making. And once I think that energy realizes that the effort is at the pinnacle level, then the gates start opening, which you really can't control. In the corporate world, we tend to control every action, but in this creative space, there's nothing in your control. There's just a desire, and there's a divine intervention which will happen at the right time, but it's driven by the effort. And this was the community question that I had, is that 70% of the lands went into the place that became Pakistan. And today, my community, which is a Sikh community, is only permitted to go there for religious purposes. It's like the Jews going to Jerusalem, or the Muslims going to Makkah, Medina. There are a lot of restrictions, but here the restrictions are more so because the trust between India and Pakistan is lacking. So every Sikh is assumed as a first parameter to be from India, and therefore getting into these places, even if you can get in, will be limited first and foremost to the few religious sites which are functional. The founder of the Sikh faith, Guru Nanak, was born in the lands that went into Pakistan. So most of the people would tend, as a first desire, if they're going to Pakistan from a religious perspective, would be to go to the birthplace of Guru Nanak, or his last, the place which is Kartarpur, where he left, where he breathed his last. That's where most people would want to go as a first introduction to Pakistan. But my interest was something bigger. My interest was, okay, there's such a vast legacy that churned in these lands and overnight got wiped out. And today's generation, if you ask them, they can't think more than these 2 or 3 gurdwaras, as we call them, but they're the Sikh temples. They can't think more than that. And that's because the umbilical cord has been severed from these lands. And therefore, the memories have, in the 4th, 5th generation, been reduced to just what you are allowed to go to. But here's these travelogues that were my source of motivation. I remember in my 20s, when I was reading history, I was always fascinated by Kashmir, Afghanistan, Punjab, Sindh, Tibet, these areas where our community's history had churned in bits and pieces. I was always fascinated. And these 2 travelogues by basically the William Moorcroft and Alexander Burns, who basically were British soldiers or British officers who traveled into the British India And as they came along, they wrote their stories, they wrote their travelogues. This was a time in 18. So if you look at the one on the left hand side, which William Moorcroft has written, the dates are written up there. 1819 to 1825 is his journey. If anyone knows the period of Afghanistan and this area of what today is the land of five rivers, Pakistan, this area, even in the 1819s to 1825, was a churning ground for the Great Game. The Great Game wherein the British who had come into the Indian subcontinent by the sea route were the masters of the sea. They'd gone all over the world, but they were afraid in Asia of two superpowers, which were neck to neck, which was the Russians and the French under Napoleon. So the Tsars and Napoleon were a threat to them, that because they were connected to the Indian subcontinent via Afghanistan or via Kashmir, Tibet, that these armies could simply walk into India. And if they did walk into India, then the British, who were only connected to their homeland through the sea route, would not be in a position to defend themselves, because there will be a distinct advantage to these two superpowers. And therefore, the Great Game, which even today is being played in many ways in Afghanistan, actually has its seedings to late 1700s. And in the period 1819 to 1825, when William Moorcroft is walking through these lands, he was sent on a mission from British India. Right now, Punjab at that time was still a Sikh kingdom under Ranjit Singh. He was asked to go on a mission to map the territories, to understand the culture, to understand the people. So in some ways, though he does not say that, but in some ways, he was a spy. And then on the right-hand side is Alexander Burnes. Alexander Burnes was given a mission to take ships into the Arabian Sea from Britain and get into the river Indus from Sindh and sail on that ship. Now the water levels are very low. You can't get those ships inside, but those times the ships could sail inside. The idea was to test whether the ships can go up the river Indus and reach a place called, in Punjab, in the Sikh kingdom, a place called Attock. And if you can reach up to there, you could probably then prove that the masters of the sea, the British Empire, could lead a force, a navy, through the Indus River and come inside Punjab should they choose to, because on the east side they were already in the India, and on the west side, if they have to get into Afghanistan, then Punjab is a buffer between. So they can get inside Punjab and then they can choose to go left and right into Afghanistan or conquer India. His objective was, he went under the guise of giving 5 European horses to Ranjit Singh, who was the Sikh kingdom's leader at that time. And he proved this point that the ships could come till Kabul. My point is that these travelogues were fascinating. As a young college-going person in engineering, as I was reading these travelogues, I was already living in these lands. And the question when I left American Express in 2014 was, if I go to Pakistan, all these historical aspects that I've studied about, can I see them? If I can see them, should there be a visual travelogue, a visual journey that should be presented in an ethnographic manner, visual ethnographic manner, so that the posterity can have something like these previous travelogues that we're talking about, which William Moorcroft and Alexander Burnes had written. That was the broader purpose that was driving me. So should there be documentations for posterity? And as I entered in Pakistan in 2014, the rest has been history. Just to summarize, I'm just showing you the map of Pakistan. On the left-hand side, on top, you're seeing the land of 5 rivers merging at Multan, the 5 rivers merging into the Indus, and then the Indus flowing into the Arabian Sea at Karachi. Basically, over 2 journeys and the 2 books, I have traveled from the northernmost territory of Baltistan to Balochistan, Sindh, along the Afghanistan border, deep inside Pakistan. I've plotted all these dots. These are approximately more than 126 cities and villages where the Sikh legacy remnants, martial, spiritual, tangible, intangible, art, architecture, many aspects have been documented for posterity in the 2 books, and then the 2 documentaries that happened along with that. Now, it doesn't stop there. These books, the documentaries finished in 2018. There were a lot of talks around the world I gave around there. And then the deeper thought in my mind was, because by now I was 4.5 years away from the corporate world, I could not go inside the corporate world. I know very well, having left at a senior level, I was the Asia Pacific head for revenue management for American Express. I knew very well when I would interview anyone in my role, the person is as good as what he's done till yesterday. And I was 4+ years away. There's no way I could go back to the corporate world. Because a choice I made, it was a very fulfilling choice that I've generated something. But then what's the next mission? Mission is not about money all the time, because one thing that you've got to keep in mind as explorers, and especially people who are associated with Royal Geographic Society will appreciate and understand, as explorers, we have to, at some point of time, choose to give up our wants and bring us down to living with needs. The day we can do that, that's the day we become truly an explorer. Because otherwise, we are just a gadget-driven explorer, modern explorer. We're calling ourselves explorer, staying in 5-star hotels, carrying the best of the equipments. That's not exploration. That is an aid. But you've got, your mindset has to change to say that I am going to give up all my wants, and it's going to be the needs and the output that's going to drive me for the rest of my life. That's where the whole question comes in, is the purpose is the prime thing. Purpose drives you always. But purposes don't come so often in creative space. So when I did these 2 books and the 2 documentaries, the next purpose that manifested, and I'll talk to you about the skills, how that happened. But let me just finish with this quickly with the stories. The next purpose that manifested in, and we started on this project in January of 2019, is a question I asked myself. Guru Nanak, who's the founder of the Sikh faith, was born in 1469. He traveled far and wide. He traveled across 9 countries, and his travel was not into the temples that the Sikh community is today associated with, but his travels were, because there were no temples at that time, what we call as gurdwaras. There were none there at that time, because he was the first guru of the Sikh faith, and he was traveling. He was on his own quest. To me, he was a philosophical explorer. I mean, we're talking about the same explorations, but he was doing it on his foot, and he was traveling by different mediums. But he was born in 1469, and he traveled to 9 countries with his Muslim companion, Bhai Mardana, who had a rabab with him. In many ways, in the modern world, you'll try and think that, 2 friends traveling on a Harley Davidson with a guitar behind them. In some ways like that, they were walking with a rabab, and he was on a spiritual quest. And his quest took him to places where the spiritualists would congregate. And the spiritualists would congregate in places of Sufi shrines, Islamic shrines, Hindu shrines, what we call as the ascetics, the Hindu ascetics, the yogis where they used to sit down, the Buddhists, the Jains. And if Christianity would have been in the Asian subcontinent at that point of time, I'm sure he would have traveled there also, but that's not where he's traveled. So in the Indian subcontinent, he traveled to places of these faiths. I think his purpose was, as an explorer, to explore the philosophies of different faiths, to hear them and to impart something. It's a 2-way process. Without hearing, you can't really have a dialogue, you can't give something out. And that's what he was doing constantly. Of the 70 years that he lived on this earth, 22 years he traveled. 22 years of his life he traveled. And I would think that we in the modern world, which is more and more fragmented by faiths, and there are wars being actually fought because of faith, we have created these boundaries around us which are so hard that we have basically lost the ability of an embrace beyond your boundary. And here's a person who traveled for the oneness of mankind. And when I look at the big production houses, I often wondered, they've made documentaries on, like BBC has a documentary on Alexander the Great. We all call him Alexander the Great, and I always say, what's his greatness? Help me understand. He killed people, he expanded territories, he looted people. Is that the greatness? Is that the role model we want to give in this modern world? Genghis Khan deserves a documentary. He did the same. Marco Polo travels for trade. It's a self-vested interest. And here's a man who's traveling for the oneness of mankind. And there's not a single documentary on his travels. I think travels and explorations are a beautiful way to present the essence of anyone's quest. And Guru Nanak's quest had to be presented. I'll just show this 2-minute video here, and then we'll get down. You'll understand the background. But as we are talking, I want to share, we started this journey in Jan 2019, and I'll talk about that, but let's show this 2-minute video and then get on to that.
In the borderless world of 15th century, people traveled distances to trade. Rulers invaded to expand territories, and Nanak glided across the geographies to spread the message of humanity. During his travels, Guru Nanak covered a large geographical tapestry, which in the 21st century comprised of 9 nations: Pakistan, India, China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. To break barriers across faiths by engaging in spiritual dialogues, Guru Nanak visited numerous Islamic, Sufi, Buddhist, and Hindu sites. Between 15th and 16th centuries, the universal narratives of Guru Nanak's travels were rendered only through oral traditions. In the 17th century, the oral narratives were strengthened by documenting them in the form of books, known as Janam Sakhis. Today, in the 21st century, the Janam Sakhis are forgotten, and division of geographies as sovereign nations have made many of the historic sites inaccessible. Thus, there is a compelling need to explore and film the sites visited by Guru Nanak so that the faded memories can be kept alive. Allegory, which means the revelation of a hidden meaning, is a tapestry of Guru Nanak's travels. It will be the first documentary of its kind to chronicle the vast expanse of sites across 9 countries that were visited by Guru Nanak. Through an exploration and documentation of these sites in the 21st century, interspersed with narratives of the past, the universal message of Guru Nanak will continue to glide through generations.
So that's the concept of what we are doing. And the one challenge, the biggest challenge in this, there are umpteen number of challenges, because this is something the Nat Geo or BBC or Discovery should be doing it. We are a small team comprising of me and my wife, and we are hiring talent and just leading this entire project. It's a 3-year project, started in Jan of 2019. The 70% of the region, those 9 countries that I'm talking about, 70% of the region today is very hard to access because of geographical, sovereign nations, the challenges, the war, the internal conflicts that are going on, or even the restrictions to actually film in certain areas, in certain countries. It's pretty much an impossible task. And therefore, if we were to ask BBC or a Nat Geo to do it, I personally think the stories that we have gone through, which I don't really share because the focus is the subject, the stories that we have gone through, I can tell you that probably this cannot be done by large organizations, because you'll not even get permissions to go inside many of these countries. I mean, American media going into Iran, impossible. Going into China and going into the Indo-China border and the Sino-China border, it's pretty much impossible in today's day. But we have, I want to share with the group here, in a 15-month journey, we have completed 100% of the filming just before Corona hit. So we were on the road for 15 months, traveling across these 9 countries. It's all been done. We are going through our certain scripting and recordings, and then from September onward, we start stitching the entire documentary together. It's a 30-episode documentary. It's going to take us about one year to 15 months. Hopefully by next year end, we'll be ready. I just want to give you a few slides of what the challenges are and really get down to the skill sets now. And I'm not going to tell the stories behind it, but just visually you'll understand. On the left-hand side, this is us. Salman is from Pakistan. We are in Afghanistan. This is myself, and my wife has clicked this photograph. We are in a place which is at before the Afghanistan problem really started, before the Russian invasion happened. Right now, every Western power plays in Afghanistan. But this place was where this lady's Begum Khalida, who met us, she invited us to her home and basically served us a lunch, but it was all under the watchful AK-47s. Every kid, every man, every woman here holds an AK-47. This entire locality was known as Prem Nagar, in near Khost on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border on the Afghanistan side. But it's a mess. There's not a single Hindu or a Sikh living there. Prem Nagar, for the people who understand from the Indian subcontinent, is a very Hindu-Sikh influenced name. But the remnants tell us there was a huge population there, but all have moved out. But Begum Khalida's love is what we have taken away from this place. It's not the AK-47 I look at. It's for their self-protection, right? In some ways, it's a new neutral. Yes, you can be a collateral damage. And we've had many experiences, near-death experiences. But this is on the right-hand side, my wife and the local person, Chebol Singh, whose wife also came along with us in the areas that we went to explore. This is literally how they had to travel with their faces covered, because you have to follow the cultural norms. Now, coming down to left-hand side, this is Kailash mountain in Tibet. The biggest challenge is getting access into Kailash Mansarovar area. But from here, tracing the path on which Guru Nanak traveled from India and having come to Kailash Mansarovar, he had dialogues with the spiritualists who used to sit here, the Hindu spiritualists at that time, and then having gone back into Kashmir, Ladakh and Kashmir on the Indian side, means that you have to travel close to the India and Pakistan, India and China border. And this Tibet is occupied by China. We know the stories in 1957. Dalai Lama left, but getting into these places and doing a filming is next to impossible. How we managed, only we know it. Iraq, it's a war-torn area. The site built in the memory of Guru Nanak is basically on the right-hand side. We were quite lucky to, the man who's coming out in the black and white picture, his grandson, with whom I'm actually shaking hands, happened to come onto that site, because this has been shelled in the, this site was made in the memory of Guru Nanak's visit to Iraq in Baghdad. It's at the place where Sheikh Belal's grave is, and the two had met there. But this place has been bombed. The Sikh temple, the Gurdwara, is no more existing. But when we reached there, this whole land has been grabbed, and there are local internal politics out there, and there's no Sikh population there. But to get to that site, to film it, it's a divine intervention that this grandson of this man, who was a paid keeper of the Sikh temple about 50 years, 60 years back, his grandson appears there from nowhere. And when I told him our mission, he helped us complete our filming. So this is some divine enablements that happen in our journey that allow us to get there. Now I'm going to really come down the last few minutes just to bring down what I was trying to tell you as to what's that skill set that one has to develop to transition from a structured environment into an unstructured environment, into the creative space, and through the unstructured, bring in a structure. What is that eureka moment? When does it come? And this is from my personal model that I've seen over a period of time. The eureka moment, I must say before I go to the next slide, is nothing else but an outcome of your self-effort. There is no free lunch in this world. If you don't make the self-effort, then you're living on chance. Yes, we have also lived on chance. These projects cannot be done without a lot of energies coming in enabling for you, but that's not in my hand. But what's in my hand is to create that self-effort, because that self-effort has taken me good 30 years to come across multiple eureka moments after I left the corporate world. And it's the eureka moment, the aha moment, when you realize a thought comes into your mind, a project manifests, and you don't know whether you can do it, whether you can achieve it, how to achieve it, and your journey starts, your exploration starts. Your financial problems are all around you. Your accessibility problems are around you. Your narratives are already embedded in your mind because you've put 30 years of self-effort inside this, and it all starts manifesting at that aha moment. But you have to create that self-effort to get to the point that the aha moments have to reappear. The biggest challenge in this creative space is that the aha moments have to keep happening to sustain yourself as a purposeful life. because in corporate life, you'll be given the task and you'll keep doing it. Someone's deciding your life. Here, eureka moments have to come to you, and there's no guarantee on that. So what do you do? Before I get down to the nurturing the skills, I want to tell you one small story. All this time when I used to read about my community, there was this one, things have to really, you have to be so passionate about it. Even if you're not there for years and years, you have to live into those places. And I was living in those places because I'm reminded of this book called The Highlands of India by Major General D.J.F. Newall. It was published in 1887. And the Sikh Empire in these lands of Pakistan finished in 1849. It was the last empire. But when D.J.F. Newall in 1850s started traveling in these regions to map the regions as an explorer, to basically write about basically what this region was all about that they had acquired suddenly, to understand the culture, customs, the topography, and what the forces were like of the previous rulers. His journey started in 1851 in the lands which were the Sikh kingdom earlier. On the top black and white picture is on the eastern banks of River Indus in the place called Darband. This is close to the Khyber Pass area, not very close, but closer to that area, west side in Pakistan. He's standing on a mountain and he's sketching this place, this sketch out here, where he's showing the meandering River Indus, and I've actually marked in red the various forts of the Sikh era that he's pinpointed. The fort of Darband, Kriplion, and he's writing a place where a Sikh regiment was destroyed in the great flood of the Indus in 1839, before the British came inside. The Baltoro Glacier up in the Himalayas actually breached, and the Indus River suddenly got flooded, and there was an encampment out here. That entire encampment got washed out. Gandhgarh, all these forts he's marking. And I used to look at this and I used to ask myself, can I stand out here because I'm a photographer? It's a pretty bad sketch. And I would say, all right, why haven't our people, before they left these lands in 1947, made a better sketch or even photographed this region in a panoramic view to leave the memories for the next generation? I used to think about it. And then I asked myself, can I do it? In the making of my second book in Pakistan, as I stood at the same place, the geography has changed. I could not go really down to the Indus River because there's a dam that has been built in the front on the Indus River called the Tarvela Dam. And there's a lot of silting that's happened in the last 30, 40 years, and the entire basin has risen up. So you really can't go. So the perspective that you're seeing of the high altitude peaks is because I'm standing at a height on the top of the mountain. Therefore, the mountains are looking smaller. But I stood at a To me, this picture is for posterity. It's a continuum to what someone did in 1851, continuing down for posterity. And how does this manifestation of a thought convert into skills and really becoming something is something you have to live with. All I'm trying to say out of this is you have to live with it. I got the opportunity. Getting into these areas is a next to impossible task because of the various challenges within Pakistan, but I was able to and I did it. But how did that happen? All right. One key takeaway I want to tell you in the next 2 or 3 slides. The key takeaway is, I say this to the people, is often we say to the youth is create your follow your passions. People will say, the advice they will give is, hey, follow your passion to the youth. And I always say, never follow your passion. Because if you're following your passion, you are a recipe for disaster. But yet, I'm something which I'm very passionate about. So what's the difference? The difference is really how you pursue your passion. One is to follow it, and one is to create it. Now, when you're following it, I know a lot of photographers who pick up the camera and they go click, 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 and this just, or they're playing golf. It's just a busy time. I'm passionate about golf, but have you created golf? Have you become golf? Have you become a photographer? Is the difference between following a passion and creating it. The day your mindset becomes, the passion is me, that means whatever you're doing at that point of time, you're giving 100% to it. 100%. And you are mastering it. And therefore, what I would see in my life, I've got two lines out here: education and corporate was a parallel track that was going on for long, but I was living in a different world. I was creating multiple passions. If I really start listing down, I often laugh at myself. I don't know why. Strangely, my interest, either I'm very my mind runs like a monkey, maybe, but it's good it runs like that because I create passions every 4 to 5 years. In my life, I've picked up some tasks, and 4 to 5 years, I've maximized it, juiced it out to the extent that whether if it was my photography, in 4 to 5 years, I was writing for magazines like Geographic and other places. Basically, it had come to a certain level at a professional level, 4 to 5 years. When I was doing history, 4 to 5 years. When I was doing music, 4 to 5 years. When I was really studying the Indian philosophy systems, 4 to 5 years. But every 4 to 5 years was 100% of me. When I did these two books on lost heritage, the Sikh legacy in Pakistan, 4 years by the clock, two books. And I moved on. So from an author, now you've gone into films. I don't know how long this journey will be, but the way if my past is an indicator, I think by 2022 or 2023, I would be done with it. And I'll be, hopefully if I'm still breathing, I would be looking for something else. But I would have done my best in this, creating the passion in this phase. So life's purpose will emerge when your mindset becomes, you are the passion, you're going to create it. And just bringing it to end in the last two slides, I want to talk about creative process itself, what I have seen for myself. I see the creative process is like an octopus trying to swim. It has a lot of tentacles. It goes inwards to give it a thrust. That's the time I would say in our real life is the skilling period. The challenging phases of your life in this sine curve, whenever you are at the bottom of the sine curve, you become an introverted person inwards. Not literally introverted in that sense, but you become more to yourself. You start skilling yourself to become a good photographer. You don't know the journey I've gone through for 3 years. I am absolutely inwards in that space. I'm doing my corporate job. To do the 2 books in 4 years, the amount of time I've spent inwards within myself is basically the skilling for doing those books, right? The research, the other things. The rest things don't matter. I'm in a very challenging phase. But basically, you're at the bottom of the sine curve, and the octopus has actually closed its tentacles, and the thrust is about to come. But one that skilling phase is going through in the creative process on the sine curve, if you look down, I call this as the blockage. Every skilling, every creative process has a phase of blockage, and I've gone through this many times. In the last 5 years, I've gone through it 4 times. But I say the deeper the well, the deeper the blockage, creativity at the bottommost level, the deeper it is, the more is the rebound. The blockage is when your only purpose in life, I can tell you my only purpose in my life at the time of blockage has been to lie on my bed and look at the fan going in a particular direction and wonder why it's looking like it's going in the other direction. That's all you're doing. You're in a creative block. But then in that process, it's the 30 years of work that you have done of creating the skills, multiple skills that are passions that are you themselves, right? Those passions. It's that eureka moment is waiting to happen. And when that eureka moment happens, your tentacles thrust out and the journey starts. 2019, when we started the journey, for 15 months, we've been on the road. We've been in a total outward phase, meeting people, doing stuff, managing the project. We are capitalizing. Once you've created the product, you're going on the upward phase, and then you deliver it to the world. When you deliver it to the world, then starts you have to flow in this phase. The divine has to help you here. The divine enablement starts coming in as complex may be the challenge, but if you start flowing with it, you come across many barriers. But if you believe in yourself, you will keep flowing and you will deliver a product. Once you deliver a product and it gets accepted by the world, then starts a very, very mundane process, which in many ways for a creative person is something you have to do. Is you have to present, you have to talk, you have to take your product, your stories. Mine are all storytelling, right? The stories have to go out in the world. To the extent I've done 100 seminars in about 9 months after my each book, right? it becomes to a point of repetition. It reminds me of my days in corporate world of just a repetitive task, but it's a mundane task. And from a creativity perspective, you are on a slide down. And again, you come to a point at that deflection point, at the midpoint of the curve, where you have to say, it's like any mother leaving their baby. You have to say, it's done now. I have to leave this. And when you leave it, that's when you slide down and you come to the creative blockage. So understand this creative process. With that, I'm going to leave you with 6 life skill statements and bring this to an end. Basically, don't follow your passion. Create your passions, become the passion. That's the mindset you have to do. And don't expect quick results. You will have to actually prove yourself for the divine to really open and manifest and give you the opportunities. So create your passions. That's all you can control. You can't even control your next breath. The key out here is never shy from trying new things. Keep trying as many things as you can. As I said, 4 years, I give myself totally to a bigger strategic passion that I'm following. But I try many things in that process. I master it. And then my mind starts opening up to something else. And that is basically the question is, where is that actually next purpose going to be? I'll tell you where the purpose I've figured out in my life is. As you give yourself 100% and you become the passion, the next purpose, the next thing that you have to try really is lying right behind you. You just have to pick it up. It's waiting for you actually, because you've upskilled yourself so much that the next thing is going to be just a natural progression from books to a documentary maker. It's a natural progression. With Peering Soul and Peering Warrior on the Sikh legacy in Pakistan being a minor division, which took me into a massive project, which probably BBC and the Nat Geo should be doing. We have taken on that onus. Take baby steps towards your goals. In American Express, my team would be asked to make, I would tell my team to make 5-year plans, 10-year plans, 1-year plans, and we used to seldom achieve them, right? But in the beauty in this entire creative space is when you are the passion and the divine starts opening the gates for you, the eureka moments come in. Those baby steps that you've taken make you so rapidly move towards your goals that at times you just don't know what happened. And it's when you'll go through the mundane process, you will lie down in your bed and you'll think, what just happened for the last 1 year or 2 years? But one thing is, be consistent. Once you start a process, be consistent. Life is looking for consistency. Life is not looking for anything else from you. Consistency, whatever you pick up. You don't want to be a photographer. You don't want to be a filmmaker or writer. So what? Whatever is your passion, pick it up. You want to do gardening? Do it 100%. You want to do cooking? Do it 100%. Become cooking. It doesn't really matter what it is. But that will take you to something bigger. Look for acceptability signals and capitalize. This is where if your work starts getting accepted, that's where you have to take it down the line to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. That's where your entire energy has to start tunneling down into, from a bigger spectrum into that smaller spectrum of acceptability signals. When they come in, capitalize them. That should become your purpose for your life. That is the purpose for your life at that point of time. And the last thing I'll end here by saying this is, never, never, never chase recognition. Don't do that. Don't drive your purposes for recognition. Do the right thing. Recognition will follow you. And when recognition comes, it'll come in such abundance that you may not be able to handle it. But let it come to you. Let the recognition follow you. The problem today is we are trying to do everything to get a quick recognition. No, focus on the deliverables. Let the recognition follow you. With that, I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amardeep. That was an amazing talk. I think each slide could probably be made into a lecture, and so much of it. Really, really interesting. Thanks so much for joining. I remember when we originally got in touch, it was over 2 years ago, so it was before the large part of this travels that you did. So really exciting now you're back and you've got all of these stories behind you. Can't wait for the documentary to come out as well. I think it should be all over Netflix. It should be on the mainstream shows. It's going to be such an interesting documentary. So jumping straight to questions, because there's a number of questions that have come in and we're out of time. So straight kind of to a number of these. I've got a more specific question on your travels. Do you ever think of traveling the path taken by General Zorawar Singh? This is from Subesh.
Sorry, what did he say? What's the question? Have I ever?
So, did you ever think of traveling the path taken by General Zorawar Singh?
Done that, been there, done that 13 years back. If you go to amardeepphotography.com on the Google and write 30 years in search of Zorawar Singh, there is a massive journey unknowingly. I'll tell you, there are certain 2-3 things I've done unknowingly. I've done these books, I've done Guru Nanak's travels, and all that is going on, right? I'll tell you, there are certain things in your life when you've done them and you're sitting back and thinking about them, and then that wow moment comes in. You say, wow, I've done this, right? And those are 2 things that I've recently been talking about. One is Zorawar things. I've written these articles many times back. Go to amardeepphotography.com, write 30 years in search of Zorawar Singh. On Google, just write down, you will find it, Amardeep's entire journey out there. But the basic thing is, I realized from my young days in school when I was there, and that's how the story starts. There's a place called Roopkund in Garhwal in the Himalayas in India. And my housemaster at the Doon School, we were having lunch one day. And I remember I was a young kid. I probably was on the 9th standard. And he was talking about this Roopkund. There are these bones. Our seniors had gone on a trek to Roopkund and come back with these skulls and bones, of human skulls and bones from there at a high altitude area from a lake. And I was asking him, Mr. Vaishnav, what are these bones? Who are these people? And he said, they are the soldiers of Zorawar Singh's army who was returning from Tibet into India. And you know what? It's embedded in my mind as a 9-year-old, in the 9th standard, probably I'll be about 14, 15 years old. And later on, I realized of all my journeys that I had done, I realized I had done 100% of the walking of Zorawar Singh's journey over a period of 10 years. And so then that's what I wrote down in 30 years in search of Zorawar Singh. But the second one is, I also realized is, unknowingly. So there's this writer, since you all are from RGS, you might be interested, read this book called Empires of the Indus by Alicia Albania. A beautiful book, an American who traveled from the basin of River Indus at the Arabian Sea and went up on the journey to Tibet upwards, right? And she's written this beautiful book about all the empires that existed, contemporary times, past. And I used to read that. When I read that book, I said, what a fascinating journey it is, right? And then I soon realized recently, I have also done the entire journey of River Indus, but the other way around, in different phases over 15 years, from Kailash Mansarovar, where is the source of Indus, right down to Karachi. But my looking is a very focused looking. I'm looking at it from a Sikh legacy perspective. So yeah, so that's the long answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. One question that's come up as well, and it's relating to your travels. So as a Sikh, you are easily identifiable to your faith. Did you at any time experience any hostility during your travels, or how is your experience there?
When you start walking down this path, one is to go on an exploration to North Pole or a South Pole. You have risks. Any explorer has risks. You go onto a ship, you have risk. I'm not trying to belittle any explorer. We are all explorers. But risks change when it comes to such territories where you're operating. You can easily become a collateral damage. Now, the one principle, every explorer has certain principles. One principle I've adopted in my life is that there's going to be no compromise in who I am. I don't want to be an explorer if I have to compromise who intrinsically I am. No compromising on my identity, no compromising on my principles. If the divine has chosen me, the gates will be opened by the divine. I will walk the way I am because every explorer takes risk. So I'm going to take that risk. I'm taking the risk into going into these places where I can be a collateral damage. When Khalida Begum is holding an AK-47, everyone in the village is holding an AK-47. I can be a collateral damage there, or I can become a conscious damage there that someone tries to pick me up because of who I look. I'm visible. Forget my visibility. It's the way I talk. I'm Singaporean. The way I talk, my color can become, hey, this guy could be good for ransom, right? So you are picking up so many risks, right? I can go on with the risks. We have had near-death experiences in these journeys. Near-death experiences. A lot of people tell me, when are you going to write your story? And I said, probably never. It's a story for another day. Because these stories are for a bigger purpose. I'm always focusing on telling the story. A lot of blood has been spilled in these past, right? The story that I'm trying to tell is for posterity, to protect for the next generation. The idea is to tell the story that's positive, that brings people together, not what I'm facing. I've already written off my life, right? So I'm walking on these journeys. It's not my story. It can be a story for another day, but not right now, because I firmly believe the day I make this my story, the divine will stop helping me.
Well, as you say, I bet those stories are absolutely endless on your own travels. Another question coming in. So did you get a sense from the communities you visited within those regions you mentioned, they've collectively lost something by kind of new political borders or loss of access between these communities? If you could maybe give your kind of take on that.
Well, we are living in a modern world. We are often saying we are living in a global village. We are coming to closer on cultures and many fronts. But I tell you, in the journeys that we are going into, and these journeys that I've done, I can only sadly say that we are getting compartmentalized, divided. At the grassroots level, the grass is not green. Grass is pretty dried up. Its boundaries have become hardened. Everyone who has actually embraced us has embraced us because of you.
Amardeep, I think we just lost you briefly there.
Right. Okay. So what I was saying is, we are very fortunate that when we have traveled, humans have embraced us. We owe our success to the people who have embraced us. But the broader story is not great. Broader story is not great. It's individuals who help you. Broader stories, the divisions, the cultures, judgments. I'm right, you are wrong. Your thought cannot be right. My religion is better than yours. It's a sad state of affairs, right? And therefore, the message of oneness is very important these days. When I look at those people who have embraced us, our entire team has faith that, positivity is there, and positivity is what will actually make us all swim across these hard times. But when I've traveled to these areas, sometimes you think, what mess we have created? What mess we have created? Cultures have got
so much of it must be education, which of course you're helping to do by providing these documentaries and books on these areas. So it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk you from my community itself. In Afghanistan, there are 85 Hindu and Sikh families left. 85 translates to 1,000 people approximately. At the peak, at the time of Russian invasion 30 years back, there were 250,000 Hindus and Sikhs living there. Reduced to 1,000. Who are these 1,000? People who don't have the vision, who don't have the financial capabilities to move. And when I was there with my wife and our team last year, we felt the pain. We felt the pain. And we tried very hard to engage across the countries to help them. We reached out to many organizations. 85 families is not a big deal to move them somewhere. But you're living in a very complicated world. And then we got some model put in place and we said, let's help them out. And nothing happened for 1 year. And in March of 2020, there is some 4 or 5 crazy people who came inside one of the Sikh temples and fired randomly and killed a few people. And this is the point where suddenly people have woken up, right? And now we are seeing the few people who are left, the last remnants left. The structures, so many structures are there, so much of heritage is there in Afghanistan of my community. But I think the division in 1947 of creation of Pakistan cut off the Afghanistan Hindu and Sikh from the mainland India. They got isolated there. 3 nations, the free access of culture, the expansion and contraction of culture stopped. Whenever there is conflict, cultures are not binary. Cultures will expand in the times of peace or will contract in the times of war and conflict. But that compression and expansion ability has been lost because sovereign nations have been created over the last 7 decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So kind of aware of the time as well on this. So maybe we'll have one more question, and we'll keep it a bit more kind of a quick response, but more about where's your favorite place? If you had to choose a place in Pakistan that you've really enjoyed throughout your travels, where would you say that place is?
Favorite place in Pakistan or a favorite
Mm-hmm.
place? Are you being specific in Pakistan or are you talking about favorite place?
So this question is more specific to Pakistan. So there's an interest in maybe traveling there. We've got a question from.
Well, interestingly, my favorite place from the work that I'm doing, Sikh legacy in Pakistan, initial gravitation is towards what my community's loss has been. And that's the favoritism to start with. That's what I'm attached to. But as you start traveling deeper and deeper, culturally, I tell you, Sindh is a place which has taken my heart away. Because you go into these Sufi shrines, you go into like places like Bhiksha's shrine, right? I've had an opportunity with my wife to stay there for 2-3 nights. And the practices that you are told about faiths and the reality that you see there, there are two polarities, right? For instance, the beauty of that place is from a Sufi aspect, you find there are 7 people who sing together out there, right? And you can just sit 24 hours, they sit. Each group sings for 9 hours in continuation, 9 hours. They have these people who are massaging their backs and all these singers are sitting there, 9 hours they sing. And, they are representing the human soul. The 7 people are representing the 7 notes of music, right? And then they are speaking in falsetto, they're speaking in the high pitch because they're representing the human soul, which is feminine and trying to merge with the divine, which is considered to be masculine in this case. So it's a wedding that they're going through in terms of the soul. So they all males tend to sing in high pitch like females. And you just sit there and you heard them. The women who come there, outside they may have pardas, outside they may have a lot of barriers, but inside they're free, absolutely. And you say, which world have you come into? And you say, actually, deep down, humans are longing for connectivity. Humans are longing for oneness. And I think that's the key message. So Sindh has taken away my heart.
Amazing. I'll keep that in mind. Definitely look out if I travel there. I'll have that as the center. It wasn't my question, but you've sold it to me. You sold it to me. So I think we'll probably wrap it up. But thank you so much, Amardeep, for coming to RGS and speaking on this virtual platform of ours now. I've got a lot of messages from the room here that are just saying, incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. So it's especially at a time like this, it's really great to have inspiring stories and kind of bucking the status quo and going out and doing it. And putting those ideas into practice. So thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure.
And thank you to everyone. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I just request that, before people leave, if you can just share my email once again, if anyone wants to quickly take a snapshot of that, and if someone wants to reach out, I'll just put the presentation up if that's okay. Just literally give me 1 second. So I'm going to put this up. And can you see this thing? Can you see it?
No, not yet.
Okay.
What I can do, Amardeep, I can share your email with everyone if they're interested after the talk that's attended.
Okay. All right. Otherwise, here it is. Share. And just literally, if anyone wants to take a picture of this, just take a picture of this one. I'll hold there for 5 seconds. You have my email address. So it goes 1,
Perfect.
2, 3, 4, and 5. We'll stop it there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much again. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today and looking forward to seeing you at the next talk. Thanks again, Amardeep. And take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.